What's up, guys? It's Eric from Rare Candy, and today I'm coming at you with my Virginia Regionals 2017 tournament report. So yeah, we just got back not too long ago, so I wanted to do a little bit of a recap of the event while it was still kind of fresh in my head. And so yeah, this is the last big Sun and Moon standard format tournament that there is, I'm pretty sure, because I believe the next regional coming up is expanded, if my memory serves me correct, and then we'll have Guardians Rising tournament. So this is the last big one for the Sun and Moon format, which was pretty exciting. And also, before we get too heavy into the actual tournament report itself, just want to give a quick shout out that our online store is fully restocked again. You guys cleaned it out before we left for Virginia Regionals, so we did restock some things. If you were wondering why something was missing, it's probably there now. So just go check that out if you were looking to pick up something. But anyways, back to the actual tournament report. Like I said, it's the last standard format tournament. So that means sets all the way from Primal Clash up to Sun and Moon were legal. Guardians Rising had been released, but it won't actually be legal until like a week or two from now. So, and you know, I've seen a lot of talk about how this has become kind of like a stale format that we have, and how, you know, it's just Decidueye winning everything, Volcanion winning everything, etc., etc. And I actually really like that, though. Some people might think that this is a stale format. I just think it's a well-defined format. You know, we've had several major tournaments with the release of Sun and Moon, so now everything's kind of solidified, and people know what's good and what isn't. So, and I like that for a number of reasons, like I said. The main one, though, for me is between work, between, you know, trying to always put out quality content for you guys, you know, just doing all the stuff in my personal life. It's really hard for me to find adequate time to test sometimes. So if there's a tournament where I actually know the format and know what's good, it really helps me because I won't have to, you know, I won't feel pressured to test as much, since it's really hard for me to do sometimes. So it's great. I already kind of know the format. I can pick a deck and just kind of go to the tournament and play. So I actually really like this tournament, and I was looking forward to it because of that. So yeah, like I said, very well-defined format. Everyone kind of knows what's good. Decidueye has been winning seemingly like every or almost every event. Volcanion's been great. Turbo Dark has been great. You know, we still have some other good decks in the format, like Quad Lapras, which did actually go on to win the entire event. We have Mega Mewtwo, we have Mega Rayquaza, Gyarados, etc. So, like I said, everyone kind of knows what to expect. And for me, that kind of shaped my deck choice a bit, I guess. So, for me, when I was trying to decide what deck I wanted to play for this event, really my criteria for myself was I wanted to be able to beat at least two of the main decks in the format. So, for me, the big three, I think, were going to be Volcanion, Decidueye, and Turbo Dark. So I needed to at least have a good matchup against two of those decks. So the deck that, well, I guess I'll tell you a couple decks I was considering. First, I was thinking about Dark Tina. That was a deck that I experimented with a little bit, and I felt like it had a good Volcanion matchup. It has a great Turbo Dark matchup since you run Salamence. And then Decidueye is kind of it varies. You know, it's an item-heavy deck, so a turn 1 Plume can really hurt it. But if you're playing against the Rainbow version and you get out a quick Giratina, it's actually a pretty decent matchup, I feel like. It just depends. But so that was a deck I was kind of testing with a little bit, and it seemed solid, but it wasn't, I don't know, I just wasn't feeling it, I guess, for lack of a better word, or a better term. So the other deck that I was kind of thinking about playing was Mega Rayquaza. Every event that I've brought it to, or I'm sorry, every League Cup I've brought it to, I've topped with this season. So I was thinking, well, may as well just play Mega Ray. Like I've been doing well with it, so it seems good. So in my head, kind of in the back of my head, I always just kind of knew that I was going to end up playing Mega Rayquaza, and I actually had it sleeved up until the night before the tournament, ready to play. I even had I got a playset of Secret Rare Metal Energies to bust out for the tournament and everything, so I was ready to go. But probably a couple days before the actual tournament, Marcus from the channel actually was talking to me about Primal Groudon and trying to hype it up to me, and I was just thinking, oh, it's just Marcus, he loves Primal Groudon, you know, he's just, you know, playing this deck for fun and all this stuff. And you know, I didn't really think much of it. Marcus always tries to convince me to play like dumb stuff, so I wasn't taking him too seriously. But He'd been telling me he's just been wrecking people with it online. I was like, oh, it's just, it's just PTCGO. You're not guaranteed a quality opponent every game, etc., etc. But then he really started breaking down the matchups for me, and it got me a little bit interested. I'm not gonna lie. At first, I was like, oh, it's weak to grass. Like, why would you play that? The best deck in format is grass. But actually, Groudon has a great Decidueye matchup. Because of things like Wobbuffet, which I hadn't really considered. Um, I think Wobbuffet's a card you see in Expanded, but in Standard, I think Groudon just has kind of been forgotten about. People have tried Carbink Break with it. So that's kind of what I thought he was talking about at first. But he was playing Wobbuffet in the list like the Expanded version. So that's when I really started giving this deck some thought. But even the night before the tournament, before I was going to leave for Virginia, I still wasn't really taking it seriously. But on the way up to the event, myself and a buddy of mine, Patrick Orgel, we were testing out Groudon in the car, on the car ride up, and it was just kind of putting in work. I'm not gonna lie. We were beating Decidueye with it, and honestly, that was enough to get us excited about the deck. So that's what I ended up playing. We got in not too late. Whenever we got into Virginia, we stopped and got something for food, and then we eventually made it over to a card shop to test with some friends. But it took so long just building the deck and getting all the cards sleeved up for Groudon. We didn't really have much time to test. I think I literally played 2 games with it, and that was all the time I had to put into test with. And again, even when I got there, I wasn't set on playing Groudon, but we ended up running into the guys over at the Metadeck. Quick shout out to those guys. Check out their stuff if you aren't subscribed to them already. But yeah, we were talking to, I believe it was Cody and Franklin, if my memory serves me correct. Sorry guys if I forget your names, but I think that's who it was. But yeah, and actually that was a deck that they were talking about as well. And so we just kind of started brainstorming with those guys, and we actually all decided on playing Primal Groudon for the tournament. Our lists weren't exactly the same. I think they were playing Puzzle of Time in their list, but we weren't. Or no, I wasn't at least. I think my friend Patrick was though. But anyway, so yeah, ended up deciding on Primal Groudon. We all just kind of went for it. It seemed like a good play. So let's get into the actual list and show you why this deck is actually good. Alright guys, for the Pokemon that we're running for Wobbuffet, just to optimize our chances of starting with it. And this is going to be, honestly, I think a huge card for this regional because it just blocks so many different things. Opening with Wob is great against Decidueye. It's actually how you win the Decidueye matchup because it turns off their Vileplume and turns off their Decidueyes as well. So that's how we're going to actually win a lot of matchups, is with Wobbuffet. So it's also great against Mega Rayquaza, Turbodark, Volcanion, etc. It just slows everything down because of Wobbuffet's Bide Barricade ability, shutting off those non-psychic abilities. So Groudon is just a glacially slow deck, so we need a way to bring our opponent down to the same speed that we're at. And so the rest of the Pokemon line is going to be a 3-3 Primal Groudon line, and we're playing it for its Omega Barrier Ancient trait. It prevents all effects of your opponent's trainer cards done to your Primal Groudons except for stadiums and tools. So this is great because our opponent can't Lysander us, they can't Team Flare Grunt us, Enhanced Hammer, even Pokemon Catcher if they wanted to play something like that. So once we get Primal Groudon up, our opponent can't touch us. Like, we can just comfortably sit back on the bench and power up a Groudon kind of at our own leisure while our opponent is stuck, hopefully, not really being able to set up with a Wobbuffet active. So that's kind of the general game plan. We open with Wobbuffet to slow down our opponent, and we build up a big Primal Groudon behind Wobbuffet while our opponent is like kind of struggling to get going. And so why do we even want to use Primal Groudon as an attacker? And that's because of its Gaia Volcano attack as well. So kind of a hefty attack cost, but it does 100 plus 100 more if there's a Stadium card in play and discard that Stadium. So between our deck and our opponents, we're pretty much always going to have a Stadium in play. So we're guaranteed at least 200 damage, 220 with a strong energy, 240 with 2 strong energies, which is actually an important number to knock out Decidueye GX, Mega Rayquaza as well, like a Fighting Fury belted, like Yveltal. So Definitely good numbers that this card hits for. 200 plus damage is pretty much always good. So yeah, Primal Groudon, he's a crazy hitter. The only thing that's bad about him is that he's really slow, and that's why we're going to play Wobbuffet and kind of slow down our opponents, like I was saying. And that's actually it for the entire Pokemon line. We don't want to play any more Pokemon because if we play any more, we're going to decrease our chances of starting with the Wobbuffet. And yeah, so that's how we're only playing the Wobs and the 3-3 Groudon. Going on to the trainer cards, this is going to be actually a pretty supporter heavy deck. We're playing 4N, which might seem a little interesting since most decks typically have a higher Sycamore count, but there's honestly just a lot of resources in this deck we don't want to get rid of. So we're playing 4N also because we are very slow. Our opponent is almost always guaranteed to take the first knockout, I think. So it's a great card because, you know, they're going to be taking prizes off these Wobbuffets while we set up Groudon. So 3 Sycamore as well, just because it is a very powerful draw card. And especially since we don't have Shaman in the list, we do need a way to draw through our deck. So 2 Lysandre, pretty straightforward. 1 Skyla, since this is a very support heavy deck, we can grab a supporter for the next turn. We run, you know, a variety of different item cards in the deck. So normally Skyla is a very slow card to use. You search your deck for a trainer card, but I think Groudon can actually get away with it because the deck is pretty slow. You really only need an attachment every turn. That's really, I think, the only super pressing thing you need most times in the early stages of the game. So it can also grab us a Stadium to hit for 200 with Gaia Volcano. So a very good card in Groudon, I think. 1 Olympia, so we get to switch our active and heal 30 from it. So definitely good because Groudon has a whopping 4 retreat cost. We don't want to get stuck with this thing in the active if we do need to retreat. We definitely want to be able to get out of the active spot if need be. We can also get rid of our Wobbuffets to retreat into Groudons with Olympia. So definitely a needed card, I think, in this deck since nothing really retreats easily. 1 Hex Maniac. So we get shut off abilities until the end of our opponent's next turn. Definitely a great card, especially if we open with it. Groudon, like I keep saying, is such a slow deck, so we need a way to slow down our opponent. Also good to shut off things like Giratina EX's Renegade Pulse ability. That way we can actually attack it. If we do have to start attacking with Groudon against Decidueye, once we bring Wobbuffet out of the active spot, we are probably going to be item locked, so we still need a way to break that item lock as well. So Hex just a very good card. 1 Pokemon Center Lady, heal 60 and all special conditions from your Pokemon. So we're trying to tank with our Groudons, and so we can just heal our Groudons. You know, it has a whopping 240 hit points, so most times our opponent is not going to knock us out in one hit, so we can heal a little bit. Also good against Espeon GX. If they confuse you, you have a way to cure the special condition, just because attacking with a confused Groudon is kind of sketchy. 1 Team Flare Grunt. So discard an energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. Marcus was playing Ranger in his list, but I opted to cut that for Flare Grunt since it can serve a similar purpose. You know, against things like Regice or Glaceon or something like that, Flare Grunt can get rid of their energy that they use to attack, and is also good against other matchups as well. So that's why I opted to cut that for a Flare Grunt. And also good in the early turns of the game while we're setting up a Groudon if we keep Flare Grunting our opponent. Just another card to help bring our opponent down to our speed. And 4 Reverse Seeker, just reuse all those different supporters. Going into the item cards, we have 2 Heavy Ball and 2 Nest Ball. So Heavy Ball lets you search for a Pokemon 3 retreat or higher, which grabs both of our Groudon pieces. And then 2 Nest Ball can search for a Wobbuffet or a regular Groudon. So very important to, I think, not play Ultra Ball in this deck. We do run Mega Turbo, so you might be thinking, well, why wouldn't you play Ultra Ball? But we do play Scorched Earth as well, so I don't think we need Ultra Ball. Like I said, there's just so many resources in this deck that we actually want to preserve. So we have 2 E-Hammer up next. Again, just another card to kind of wear down our opponent and bring them down to our speed. So discard a special energy from one of your opponent's Pokemon. You know, good against things like Decidueye, Mega Rayquaza, Darktina, Mega Mewtwo, etc., etc. 2 Mega Turbo to get attach a basic energy from our discard to one of our Mega Evolutions. Pretty self-explanatory. 2 Assault Vest. This is actually such a good card in this deck. It is ridiculous. So it's a tool card you attach to one of your Pokemon, and it reduces damage by Pokemon with special energy by 40. So if you're going against a Mega Rayquaza, even with a full bench, they can't one-shot you with Emerald Break. If you're going against things like the Decidueye, which almost exclusively plays special energy in certain lists, it can just drastically reduce their damage. Especially against Decidueye, if you play, like the ideal way the matchup should go for you to really beat that is you just wall with Wobbuffets with Assault Vests, and you build up like a big Groudon with a weakness policy on your bench, and you just kind of win. But yeah, Assault Vest is just stupid good in this deck. Like I said, Groudon can't really be knocked out easily as it is. So between Center Lady and things like Assault Vest, it's really easy for them to force your opponent to like 4-shot you sometimes. It's insane. So next up we have 1 Heavy Boots. It increases your HP by 20 and makes it so that you can't be confused. And this is actually really good too in certain matchups because Turbo Dark and Volcanion only play basic energy, so Assault Vest is not as good. And the confusion part on Heavy Boots is really good too because it means Espeon can't confuse you. And that was something I was kind of worried about. It was like status condition stuff, potentially screwing over Groudon. Next up, 1 Weakness Policy gets rid of your weakness for the Pokemon it's attached to. So obviously this is going to be for our Decidueye matchup. Also good against Vespiquen as well if we do run into that. 1 Floatstone just to give free retreat to whatever Pokemon it's attached to. But we're also playing 2 Switch just to switch our active out. And so the reason we're playing more switches as opposed to Floatstones is because we want to attach a different tool, maybe a Heavy Boots or Assault Vest, and still be able to switch if need be. Because if we have like an Assault Vest down, we can't attach a Floatstone. So next up we have 1 Professor's Letter just to get 2 basic energies out of our deck, especially since we run Skyla already. We can Skyla effectively for an energy for the turn. So that's going to be it for the item cards. And then for our stadiums, we're playing 3 Scorched Earth. Discard a fighting energy from your hand to draw 2 cards. Just some extra form of draw power since Groudon is so slow, and it's actually super easy to dead draw and just have this deck brick on you, which is unfortunate. But yeah, so we're playing Scorched Earth to kind of mitigate that a little bit. 1 Parallel City just to potentially limit our opponent's bench size down to 3. We can also reduce damage from things like the Decidueye, Volcanion, and Lapras done to us. Then just 1 Shrine of Memories to allow us to use attacks from our regular Groudon if need be. Because sometimes if our opponent knocks out like our only Wobbuffet in play and we're forced to promote Primal Groudon early, then we might have to use Groudon's Rip Claw in order to attack for a couple turns. And sometimes actually the regular Groudon's Massive Rend attack can be really good if we don't have a stadium in play already. So that's kind of a side note. You can use that as well, but if you have Shrine, you already have a stadium, so you'll probably just want to use Gaia Volcano. But as a side note, the regular Groudon's Massive Rend attack is pretty decent as well. But yes, that's going to be it for the stadiums. We're playing 5 just to kind of always ensure that we have 1 in play. And then for our energies, we're playing 4 Strong Energy and 7 Fighting Energy. So that is going to be the list we're going to use, guys. It did pretty well. Honestly, it is still a clunky, slow, inconsistent deck. If you wanted to, you can maybe cut some of the disruption stuff to up your maybe supporter or Scorched Earth count or something like that. But I think no matter what, Groudon is going to be kind of a clunky deck. It's something you just have to accept. But this is the list I ended up playing. Like I said, I only played, I think, 2 games with it the night before. So definitely a big gamble on my part, but I felt like it was a good meta call. You have a great Decidueye matchup. Turbo Dark is almost an auto win. Volcanion is a great matchup. Lapras is near close to an auto win. Mega Rayquaza is favorable. I think some of your worst matchups are going to be like the Vespiquen deck, Gyarados, like non-EX, non-GX attackers. And maybe to a lesser extent, Yveltal and Mega Mewtwo are also going to be a little tricky. But again, my standard for the tournament was I need to be able to beat at least 2 of the main decks, and Groudon has a good matchup against all 3. So it just seemed like a super, super solid play. And so let's get into the actual matchups and tell you kind of how my tournament run went. So round one, I faced a Dark Dragons deck, and this is actually one of, I think, my worst matchups, which is kind of weird because Turbo Dark is actually a really good matchup for Groudon, but the Dark Dragons version is a lot harder because of Giratina EX. So initially when my opponent flipped over a Darkrai, I was really excited. I was like, okay, cool, we got Turbo Dark. It's going to be a good, first round win. But then he hoopas and grabbed himself a Giratina and like a Salamence or something like that, and then my stomach just kind of like tightened up, and uh, I started to get a little stressed out over that. But it's still not an unwinnable matchup. I still run Enhanced Hammers and Team Flare Grunt, so it is winnable, but it's definitely not good. I forget exactly how the game went, but I know the first game my opponent won somewhat decisively. I forget exactly how many prizes I had taken versus how many he took, but he did win game one. Game two, however, went a little bit more in my favor, and it kind of worked more how Groudon's supposed to, and he eventually was able to get up Giratina, but I ended up taking off like all of his energy, with my Enhanced Hammers, Team Flare Grunts, and eventually I had only, I believe, one prize left, and all he had was one Giratina EX in play with no energy on it. And what was it? Yeah, I needed to hit Hex in order to finish knocking it out because I did have a Stadium in play, I believe. So I just needed Hex, and I had, I think, like 4 or 5 cards left in my deck, and so he ends my hand like every time I have it, and eventually time gets called in our game two. So I was basically playing for a tie at that point. I was trying to just win this one, that way we just go to game three and we instantly tie. So time in the round was called, and like I said, my opponent keeps ending me, and I had, on my last turn of the game, I had 4 cards left in deck. He ends me down to 1 card, so I get 1 card and a top deck for for my turn, and I whiffed it. I didn't get my last Hex, so my opponent ended up, because of that, winning the entire series because he won game 1 and game 2 did not finish. He won the whole series, so I'm starting off 0-1, which I'm not happy about, of course, but it happens sometimes. I'll take that against an unfavorable matchup. But next round, I got paired against the rainbow version of Decidueye, which I was extremely excited about. The rainbow version, well, actually, either one's I'm fine to play against, I think. But the rainbow one can be a little tricky because they run Regice to wall against your Groudons. But, just starting with Wobbuffet is so strong. I mean, like I was saying earlier, it shuts off Vileplume, it shuts off Decidueyes. You can kind of hide behind your Wobbuffets and just power up your Groudons, and they can't really do too much until then. I have Enhanced Hammers to take off their energies, Team Flare Grunts, and so I won that series 2-0 pretty decisively, kind of as expected. Going on to round 3, I got paired against an Umbreon Wobbuffet deck, which, again, on paper, I think I have a pretty decent matchup against, but my opponent ran some interesting cards. I remember in our game 1, I forget if I started Groudon or what, but I did not win our first game. I forget what happened. I think I just, like, my deck kind of bricked and I didn't really have anything to use, so I just scooped and went to game 2. It's kind of something you have to do with Groudon sometimes, because you can have these unplayable like openings, and you have to kind of learn when to scoop because it takes you so long just to complete a game, just to set up. So we went on to game 2, and I was setting up like normal, and I was actually about to get to the point where I was going to 6-0 my opponent. I think I only had 1 prize left in the game, and my opponent drops down a Bunnelby. It's the one back from Ancient Origins, I'm sorry, Primal Clash, that has the Omega Barrage attack, so and it has the Burrow attack, so it discards the top card of either player's deck, I believe it is, or maybe it's just your opponent's. I forget. But either way, he discards the top card of my deck, and then it lets the Omega Barrage lets him attack again, so he gets to discard 2 cards from the top of my deck. So what my opponent does is he Lysanders up a Wobbuffet that has no Floatstone, and he mills the top 2 cards in my deck, and he mills my last switching card that I have. And so I got stuck with Wob active, and he milled me for the game. So I was a little salty, I won't lie, just because I was going to 6-0 him otherwise. It was a decently favorable matchup. None of his crushing hammers or any of that stuff would work. But this one Bunnelby it won him the series. So again, I'm down to 1-2 now, and I'm feeling really bad because I came all this way. I played this weird deck last minute that I really had no experience with. I didn't even know if my list was good, so I was kind of regretting my deck choice at this point. But nevertheless, we still have what 6 more rounds at that point, so I have to keep going. I can still make day two. So next up, I play against an Umbreon Evolutions Zoroark deck, kind of like the one we posted on the channel before. But yeah, so again, I'm playing against Umbreon, and I feel really fine about this matchup, just because it's Umbreon. You don't even need a Stadium in play to attack or to knock it out. But in this one, I forget exactly how the series went. The one thing I was worried about though was, okay, yeah, I think something similar happened. I think my opponent just had a better start than me game one, and he beat me, or I scooped and went to game two. Yeah, I think that's what it was. I scooped and went to game two because I'd had like a horrible opening. Won game two, but game three, it came down to the very last turn of time in the round, and that turn I was able to take a knockout to win the game. So I ended up winning that series. It was extremely close. I'm a bit of a slower player, and I believe my opponent said he was fairly new. He had come back into the game, so I think he was a little slow during the match, and I think that's what ended up sending us to time. But I barely was able to squeak out a win. And this is actually a matchup where people not being familiar with your cards actually can really benefit you when you're playing a deck like this, because several times during the course of this series, my opponent, I think, tried to Lysander my Groudon or my Primal Groudon, or like tried to Team Flare Run it. And the thing is, whenever your opponent plays one of those cards against Primal Groudon, the card still gets played. Just the effect of it gets prevented. So that's actually one good thing about this deck, is you can kind of catch your opponent's misplaying, since they're not used to dealing with Omega Barrier. So that's actually one reason I like this deck for regionals too, because it kind of makes people misplay. But yeah, it's kind of a side note. So anyways, yeah, I did win that series, so I'm back up to 2-2, starting to make a little bit of a comeback. Next round, I'm playing against Tauros Garbodor, and this I don't think could be any more of a great matchup, because yet again, it's a deck that's very reliant on things like Enhanced Hammer and Crushing Hammers, and none of those cards will work against your Primal Groudons. Tauros can't really do anything to Primal Groudon. It can smack you for 60, but then Primal Groudon just comes up and one-shots Tauros. It never gets a chance to use its Mad Bull GX on you. So definitely a very favored matchup for me. But nevertheless, my opponent did have a couple tricks up his sleeve. He had the Mewtwo from Evolutions, which was a good attacker against Groudon. He also attempted to go aggro Garbodor against me, and actually our first game, he powered up a Garbodor. I forget the name of its move, but it is 60 and poisons and confuses your opponent's active. And so I remember I had to just attack with my Groudon. I didn't have a way to switch or anything like that. So I just had to risk it, and I flipped heads on my attack, knocking out its Garbodor, and that ended up winning me the game. So it was very unfortunate. It came down to a coin flip to decide the outcome of that game, but that's just how it goes. And then the second game, I actually got down my heavy boots. That way I couldn't be confused, and I won that game as well. So I won 2-0 there. So again, I'm feeling okay. I'm starting to hit some good matchups. Going into the next round, I play against Volcanion, and actually was playing against a friend of mine from the Wilmington, North Carolina area, so a little unfortunate. I had to get paired up against somebody that I know, but that's just how it happens sometimes. But yeah, so he's playing against Volcanion. Game one, I won pretty decisively. I started Wobbuffet and just kind of did my normal thing. Then game two, I started Groudon, and I almost made a comeback, but I think starting with Groudon just was too bad, and it allowed Daryl enough turns to get set up to potentially overpower me. But that game actually, I believe, went to time, if I'm not mistaken, or I think that time got called as that game was finishing, and our game was going to tie. But Daryl was actually nice enough. He offered me the win on it, so I'm very grateful to him for that. Very sportsmanlike of him. Yeah, because both of us, either of us tying at that point, wouldn't have done much for us. So very appreciative to Daryl. So I guess I technically won that series. So again, I'm feeling pretty good. So moving up to what 4-2 now. So next up, I get paired against another Volcanion deck, and yet again, it was a similar situation. I started Wobbuffet, and I just kind of did my thing and set up. I won both games pretty decisively, and it was another one of those matchups where my opponent, I think, wasn't used to playing against Primal Groudon, so he was trying to Lysander it, or I think he benched a Shaman under Wobbuffet, and I think that really hurt him at one point as well. So I was able to win 2-0 against another Volcanion matchup, or no, I forget if it was 2-0 or not. I think I won game one, and then our second game didn't complete. I think that's what it was. But anyway, so I'm moving up. I'm up to 5-2. I just have to win my last two matches, and I'm guaranteed day 2 of the tournament. So I'm really excited because all of the other guys in our group weren't doing so good. So the dream was resting on my shoulders to carry Groudon to day 2. And next up, I got paired against a Mega Rayquaza deck, which again I'm feeling pretty good about. Wobbuffet really shuts down that deck. I have Parallel City, Enhanced Hammers, Team Flare Gun, so I have a decent amount of ways to deal with Mega Ray. So game one, I started Wobbuffet. It wasn't actually slowing him down that badly. He had Ultra Balls to get Hoopas out because Hoopa's ability still works underneath the Wobbuffet lock, and he had supporters, so I never could really catch him in a turn where he just had like a dead hand or anything like that. So he was fortunate there. And actually, there was one turn in particular that I think really made, well, 2 turns, I should say, that really made a difference in the course of the game. I needed to get a strong energy to knock out his only Mega Rayquaza that he had powered up. So I Sycamored my whole hand away, and I whiffed the energy, and I was forced to, I think, just attack for 200 because Mega Rayquaza is resistant, so I had one strong energy and I needed a second one to knock it out, and I whiffed. So that was a big turn, but even still, it wasn't the end of the world. I actually managed to come back, and we were both dead even on prizes, 2-2. And on my last turn of the game, I attacked with Primal Groudon the turn before. I was in a good spot, and my opponent didn't play anything out of his hand, so I was under the impression he had a dead hand and didn't have much to work with. And I had a Versus Seeker, and I had Pokemon Center Lady and Hex Maniac in my discard pile. And so I was trying to decide which way I wanted to go this turn, and I was thinking, well, okay, my opponent didn't play anything. My Groudon's kind of damaged, so I'm going to play Pokemon Center Lady and just heal my Groudon a bit just to ensure that I don't get knocked out. But little did I know, my opponent drew a Shaman off of his prizes the previous turn, and kind of exploded on his next turn and knocked out my Groudon for the game. So that was a super, super close game, and I guess I misplayed there at the end. But again, I was under the impression my opponent had a dead hand, so I was like, I guess I should just heal. But maybe in hindsight, Hex would have been the better play just to ensure my opponent didn't have a way to deal with my Groudon. But so that was very unfortunate. And in game 2, I just started Wobbuffet and like literally a hand of energy, and I didn't have anything to work with, and I got beat. So unfortunately, guys, at that point, the dream was dead. Once you get 3 losses, you cannot make day 2 at a tournament like this. So I was a little bit bummed out, but I can still win my next round and get top 128 or top 64 and get some packs and points. So I still decided to play out my last one of the day, and I got paired up against, luckily, a Turbo Dark deck. This is one of Groudon's best matchups because they can just Oblivion Wing, or they can Dark Pulse or whatever and do whatever they want. But really, once you get a Groudon up, you're good to go. You can just knock out anything that they promote. And yeah, so I won pretty decisively 2-0 against that deck as well. So I finished for the day 6-3. Still, I think a pretty solid record. I believe I was the top Groudon player out of all of our group that went to the event, if I'm not mistaken. So I was a little proud of myself for that. I think my resistance was kind of bad, though. I had one opponent who went like 1 in 5 drop or something, and I think that really hurt me, and it knocked me down to 85th place, so I didn't even get top 64 as a result. But nevertheless, I got top 128, and I still got some championship points. So, and I went 6-3 with Groudon, so that I feel like that in and of itself is kind of cool. So, little anticlimactic, and that's kind of like my sob story for regionals. I feel like this always happens to me. I'm always one game away from day two, and this regional was no exception. But yeah, so that was Groudon. I actually surprisingly don't regret playing this deck for this tournament, despite not having much practice with it, and maybe making a couple misplays. I feel like my losses were due to either the matchups themselves or Groudon just kind of bricking at times. I think in that Rayquaza matchup, you could make the argument that I maybe misplayed not hexing, but overall I feel like I played pretty well, and yeah, I think the deck overall performed well. As far as the list I used, I'm not sure if I would change anything or not. I would honestly just have to test more. Yeah, I didn't put too much work into the list, unfortunately. I just kind of built what Marcus had, changed a couple cards, and called it a day. But overall, I like the deck. Yeah, guys, that's gonna wrap up pretty much my tournament report. As far as closing thoughts, just a big shout out to Marcus actually for being adamant enough about this deck and getting me to play it. Shout out to the guys over at the Meta Deck for kind of collaborating with us and sharing kind of what they've been playing in their Groudon deck and you know scrubbing out with us all playing Groudon. But yeah, overall a good weekend though. Played some side events, saw some friends I hadn't seen in a while. Overall a good weekend for sure. But yeah, I think that's going to wrap up this tournament report, guys. I'll be sure to put a link to Marcus's list that he posted in case you do want to check out what he is playing. Like I said, my list is a couple cards different, but if you just want to see the overall idea of the deck, it'll give you an idea how it plays. But definitely a fun deck and a fun regional for sure. But yeah, as usual, guys, feel free to like and subscribe, and don't forget to check out our merchandise over at rarecandytcg.com. If you can pick up something to help support the channel, it'd mean a lot to us. But with that, I appreciate you watching, and we'll see you for the next one.